from 3 to 4 o'clock. And you can get the second 7 free. Just pay shipping and handling. So I'm going to have to vamp for like 15 minutes because everyone thinks in-person class doesn't start for another 10, 15 minutes. So, but that's okay. Yeah, we're doing a in-person simulcast this morning because our teaching staff is down by 1, and Josh goes, I could just do so much.
I did not.
Yeah. It's a strange world when you can sit and look at yourself inside this video loop that is the, so. I'm going to say good morning to everyone that's with us by the webcast. Today is our first Sunday simulcast. It's going to be a little bit different, and unless you're brand new to us, you understand that different happens. So we're going to bloom where we're planted this morning, and we're not going to get started in earnest really for about 10 minutes because we always do table talk, but I'm the only guy at the table, so I guess I'm the guy that's going to be talking. We're excited to have Yeji this morning and not having to cast her out of the church for going dancing 3 weekends in a row. 2 we'll tolerate, 3 we'll cast out. So
it was for weddings. I don't do that.
It was for weddings, Yeji says. That's a justification. Now, to Yeji's defense, she was the next to the last person on the dance floor. You know it's time to wrap it up when there's only 2 people left. And one of them's Yeji because she's going to go all night. So she's not going until someone makes her. So her and my niece were the last 2 ladies standing. But it's all done. They're both married and... I just thought of something. I haven't filed their license.
You got 30 days?
Yeah, I got 30 days. I just had a mother stroke for nearly there a minute because I was like, now where was it I put that thing?
You don't want to broadcast that.
I know the mini Joneses aren't watching. So, okay, yeah. Tuesday probably would hurt, but so here's a funny story about marriage license. When I officiate a wedding, I always offer to handle the filing of it and all that because, folks have their minds on other things. And man, Jeff didn't even take my advice. It's all right, Jeff. I'm used to people not taking my counsel. Oh, yeah. See, Jeff throwing his bride under the bus. Because Jeff would have said, you see this foot, Melinda? I'm about to put it down. Don't make me put it down. Anywho, back to marriage licenses. So I always volunteer to take care of the filing and stuff for newlyweds. But I always ask them, are you traveling? And if you are traveling, are your accommodations in any way, shape, or form listed in your maiden name? This is only a problem for the brides. And I asked this couple one time, and the answer was no. And I'm always, are you sure? And the answer was, yeah, we're good. So I get a phone call by midday Monday, and there's a young lady on the other end of the line, and she is beside herself because she made her airline ticket reservation in her married name. And the only thing that has her married name on it is her marriage license. That's the only. And so she calls me wanting to know if I still had it, and the answer was no. It's already in the U.S. Postal Mail because it was in a different county. And I'm not sure what they figured out, but I guess they figured it out. But so yeah, a text on Tuesday wouldn't be a bad thing. All right. So trust but verify, the great Ronald Reagan said. So, but so Jeff, how was your eastbound and down run?
It was good, except we need an infrastructure bill because there's no roads between here and there that are
Yeah, they're pretty terrible. Yeah.
Oh, the bridge in Memphis.
Oh, they did it? Okay.
That was good.
Yeah. And it's a new interesting creed to that song, Walking in Memphis. If you can't drive.
Train from east of Memphis all the way to Tennessee. The whole time I was there.
For those you don't know, Jeff, since retiring, has come upon financial difficulties, and now he's smuggling sides of beef to the east. We're not sure if it's illegal. It's just a little weird. Excuse me, Mr. Phillips, why do you have 30 Yetis in your car?
I thought that if I get pulled over, I'm going to have to pull all this meat out because I think I'm running drugs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or you get one out and offer a barbecue.
So I never thought I should spend the money on a Yeti,
Yes?
but man, that thing was still 10 hours later was still solid and broken.
Yeah. Yeah. So the elder at ALF officially endorses Yeti coolers. He is available for advertisements. So, Tim, it's good to see you. You say you're under the weather? Yeah. That's good. Anybody else have something blown away on, what was it, Thursday? Wednesday?
We had power outage.
Power outages? That was for serious. It was tough, yeah. Crazy. Ronnie, you got big plans for tonight? No. No? Your house swamped over with trick-or-treat kids? Oh, now I know why Melinda had to be back. She had to be back to hand out candy. Psh.
At least 1 to 4 important.
Man. Well, I think my granddaughter's going to swing by your house. So, I think. But, yeah. So, Halloween. Here it is. That and the great divide between our friends the Catholics.
He said, remember tomorrow, process that, they'll all be full of candy.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you need something, Candyland, I think, is open. So. Candyland was sporting the good stuff. Wasn't any generics. People who've come through Candyland, they go, that ALF, they've got the money. They've got the money. I believe today may be the soft opening of the new worship center at Highland Terrace. I think. I've seen photographs inside. I've not been inside. And they built it differently than I expected they would. They went with a more modern layout design and everything, with chairs and such. So I was surprised at that. I expected a little more traditional look. So, but anywho's. Well, let's see. What time is it? Yeah, it seems about right time. So it's all weird because everybody walked in going, "What are you doing here already?" So, because.
So I joined the online, then I remembered, oh yeah, he's doing both. So I quickly backed right down.
Yeah, it'd have been weird having crosstalk and not actually been in the same room. So, yeah. So, all right. Well, this morning we are doing our first ever Sunday school simulcast. I would invite everyone here to say hello to everyone there, but the way the camera angle is, they can't see you. So, and unless you get close to the mic, they can't hear you. So,
Say there's between 500 and 600 here.
that's right. Yes, it's so hard for everyone to see me with the millions and millions of faces. So, but we're really glad to be able to do this, and we're really thankful to have our online family with us as well. Today, I've started with a photograph. Those of you online can't see it, but it is a classic antique mousetrap. It's wooden, and that's back when it would break 3 fingers and there's a little cheese laying on there. So I asked the question online. Ronnie, you missed it. I don't know how that happened. But in a mouse's life, let me ask you this. Do you ever think about what life is like for other creatures? Yeah. You know, we've got 2 cats. And our cats surely must think this is what heaven is like. 3 squares a day, clean potties, all the food, and it just shows up. It's like manna. It falls from heaven. Water, climate control. They have no expectations of anything. You can't expect a cat to do anything. You know, they don't even have the duty of guarding anything. But, you know, and then sometimes I think of cattle. You're driving along the highway and those cows are out there inside the fence. And I wonder, do they get bored? Or do they look through the fence at you and I going, man, those people need to just slow down and enjoy life a little more. I don't know. But in a mouse's life, I wonder this, because I have time. I have 3 channels. When they see an apparatus like this one, is this a temptation or a test? So let me ask you this question. Is there a difference between a temptation and a test? I'm trying to see those 200 faces in the back of the building. Everyone's looking because everyone's afraid to answer because
They're not all afraid to answer.
they're not all afraid to answer. I hadn't heard an answer from him yet. Is a temptation and a test the same thing? Depends on which way that you're going. Can you broaden that? Help us understand that a little better?
Kind of like a square, a rectangle analogy, but rectangle not square. Temptations would all be tested and all tests are temptations.
I'm still hung up on the rectangle is a square, but a square is not a rectangle?
Square is a rectangle is not a square. And y'all gotta make it simple because he's gotta repeat it for people. They can't hear you.
A rectangle is not a square, but a square is a rectangle?
Rectangle is a square. No, it's not. Yeah, rectangle.
Fist fight.
Wow, from the upper deck.
So the debate on the floor is, say it one more time, Ryan, because I'm simple-minded. A rectangle,
Square is a rectangle. Rectangle is not a square.
a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. I'm going to have to chew on that because I'm...
So you have 3 confirmations right here. Debbie nodding her head yes. Donna chimed in like he knows. Up there, yeah. So the voice from above.
Yeah, Josh, I don't know if Josh is right or not. He's learning theology. Okay, I'm going to have that one unpacked for me because I didn't pass geometry very good. Very goodly. Anyway, so is a temptation the same as a test? It's an age-old question. Now let me ask you this. In the Greek, there's a word, and this word is used meaning both of these. It's used for temptation, pyramosis, I think is that even close, Josh?
I don't think so.
Okay. I shouldn't have asked him because you would have known. But the word in Greek for temptation is used in Matthew, 1 Corinthians, and James. And the same word is used to describe trials in James and 1 Peter. The meaning of the word is to put to proof by experiment of good or experience of evil. To scrutinize, entice, discipline, examine, to prove, to try, or to tempt. So the question on the table is, what's the difference between a trial and a temptation? They are different. The outcomes can be different. The motivations are different. So we're going to focus just on the temptation side this morning. A temptation is, on one hand, is signified as an attempt to entice someone into evil. So one of the things you can ask yourself is this a temptation or a trial, and is it enticing you into evil? Who is the source of origin for temptation? Satan. Satan is the origin source of temptation. So the question that gets asked periodically is, why did God tempt me? Now that I've done this, and now that I've been caught, and now that I'm paying the price, why did God tempt me? So the question on the table is, can God tempt you? Does God tempt you? My bride's shaking her head in the very widely accepted direction of no, unless it's been reinterpreted. Yeji, what was yours? Okay. Yeji says God will put you to the test, but he will not put you to the temptation. Okay. Anybody else? I'm not going to ask you if you're going to admit to that, but have you ever heard someone ask, why does God tempt me? Yeah. Well, if temptation's origin source is not of God, but of the adversary, then by default, God does not tempt us. It would be unloving, it would be unkind, it would be unholy, it would be uncharacteristic for the Lord. And so we must be careful that we don't give undue credit to the Lord for what our adversary, the tempter, does. So we see that the Bible describes temptation in a negative light, in a negative instance. The purpose of temptation is threefold. The first is to undermine God's plan and God's will for us. Think about it. When we're tempted to something, inevitably, if we pursue that temptation, somewhere there's going to be a delineation between your will and God's will. Now, you may not recognize it at the very moment. Sometimes it's going to take a little while to get there. But inevitably, temptation will lead to a separation or an undermining of God's will for our lives. Secondly, to stray man away from God's way. There's two ways in which we can live life. There's our way and the Lord's way. And the challenge that we face is there's an intermingling sometimes. And if we're not careful, our way can become the primary way instead of the way the Lord would have us to live. What are some simple differences between what might be a human's way of living life in light of a God's way of living life? What are some simple distinctions between the two? What might they look like?
Doing whatever is best for me.
Okay. It's doing first and foremost in consideration and action what is best in my interest, or what I think is best in my interest. Okay. That's true. Good old selfishness. One of the things I think about when it talks about living different is just social media. Social media tells us you can say anything you want, anytime you want, any way you want, about whoever you want, for as long as you want. Well, my Bible teaches me that that's not the way God wants me to live. God wants me to measure my words. He wants me to be kind in thought, word, and action. He wants me to be loving and mature. And can I say this? Sometimes God just wants me to leave stuff alone. Sometimes it's just not worth, it's just not worth it. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. When it comes to social media and all those things, we have to first and foremost ask ourselves the question, How will this response affect my effectiveness for the kingdom of God? I ask the Lord, everything I do, I want to do in light of the kingdom. And so I get asked a lot, well, Jimmy, don't you have an opinion about this or about that? The answer is yeah. And depending on what it is, I might have 3 or 4 of them. But the question I ask every time I text, email, is this: is it beneficial for the kingdom? And if it's not, now, that doesn't mean I don't like to have a little fun, and it doesn't mean I won't, be a jokester a little bit, but my little sphere of influence is important, and what I put into that sphere is important to me. And I am one of those guys who thinks to myself, right now, I think I've got 1,500 friends. Isn't that something, Ronnie? I'm accomplished.
It is.
I'm an influencer. That's right. But especially if what I want to say or what I want to react with is a controversial issue, I will find myself trying to think of what the 1,500th person might think. How are they going to interpret this? Now you say, well, Jimmy, doesn't that just make you tired? Yeah. But it falls in line with the weaker brother principle. I want to live my life in such a way that I take into consideration everyone that I can. Now, does that mean I'm not going to live my life? Well, I am going to live my life. But it is influenced by those that I'm seeking to influence. So we see, to undermine God's will and plan for our lives, to stray a man from the way of God, and thirdly, temptation at its core is to deny the authority of God and to seek our independence from God. Jeff, so you were spot on. There's only one captain's seat, and we get to choose who sits in it. And temptation at its core calls us to deny the authority of God in our lives and to assume the independence of our lives. And that's really hard, isn't it? One of the things about being an American that I love is the independent spirit of Americans. We're really being tested right now. There are ideas and theologies, well, not theologies, but ideologies out there that are contrary to our human nature. Our human nature and our Americanness. I saw one of the scariest Halloween costumes ever, Ronnie. And it was a man who was dressed up as a job application. Everyone in this room believes what? You should work if you're going to eat. The Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. I assume, except for maybe Josh, everyone in this room believes you should get up and go give a good day's labor for a good day's pay.
Unless you're a cat.
Unless you're a cat. That's right. And then, heaven is your home all the time. That's true. But there's an idea in our culture right now that is not the case. That is not what they're saying. Well, listen, someone else will take care of you. Well, that only lasts until someone else runs out of money. Right? And so we see this. Temptation calls a believer to deny or to try and separate from the authority of God. The Bible says what? We are not our own. We've been bought with a price. Now, as an American, it is hard to get your mind right with the idea that you are owned by someone. And in today's culture, I don't know if you've heard this, Ronnie. Be prepared. PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, wants the Major League Baseball to change the phrase bullpen. It is offensive and demeaning for bulls. Now, you're sitting there and you're going, now Jimmy made that up. I only wish I were. That's the reason there's a Washington football team. That's the reason the Cleveland baseball club, the Guardians, at least the Atlanta, Braves might win the World Series, which I think is delicious. That'll show them for moving the All-Star game. But anyway, I digress. So temptation is about taking us further away from an intimate fellowship, and I'm not going to say relationship, but an intimate fellowship with the Lord. What are the ways of temptation? Temptation always starts in the heart and the mind of man. I read it somewhere once that says this, that Satan doesn't fish in ponds that are still and satisfied. Temptation often comes in the areas that we are dissatisfied. Now, let me ask you this. Can something be a temptation for one person and not for another? Absolutely. Now, what's interesting to me is the adversary tends to model the temptation for the target. Does anyone here eat rhubarb pie? What is rhubarb?
It's what they put in cement.
Oh, yeah. Tied together. Rhubarb. Yes. Now, how about this? Holidays are coming up. Anybody here mincemeat pie eaters? Okay.
They all passed away a long time ago.
See, if PETA wanted to protest mincemeat pies, I might get on board with that. What's that? That's right. So man can eat his mincemeat pie. That's what I'm saying. So my granddaddy Vaughn was a mincemeat pie guy. And my mother would make him a mincemeat pie for the holidays. And you know how much competition he had for that? Zero! If my mother had put that in the fridge, I wouldn't have eaten it at 3 a.m. It's an old story. You have to be around to get. Yeah. But it begins in the mind and the heart of man, in our deepest motives and desires. 1 John 2:16 talks about 3 of the most fundamental means by which we're tempted. The first is the lust of the flesh. The second is the lust of the eyes. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Now, ladies, we men are hardwired to our eyes. We must be very diligent to guard our eyes, because it's a short walk between these peepers and other bad choices. We're just kind of hardwired that way. And then thirdly is the pride of life. These 3 fundamental principles summarize any temptation that we may face in our daily lives. Lust of the eyes is described this way in Genesis. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, it has to pass the eye test. And it can be a person, but it can be a thing. It's really hard sometimes if you find yourself tempted. I often joke about this. A wise man said this to me years ago. It's not the first look that's the sin. It's when you break your neck for the second one. And that's true. We can't control everything that comes across our peripheral. But we do have control whether we snap the neck back for the second one. So today is hockey day. There's a hockey game, and I'm looking forward to going. They lost last night in overtime. That's what I get for not going. But at the Allen Americans, they have, what do they call them? Is it the ice dancers? Let's just say this. It's scantily clad young ladies doing what they call dance. First of all, I have no idea how this works for hockey. Second, I'm not even sure if I'm a big fan for NFL teams. Thirdly, what I do know is they are dressed in a way that I don't need to be looking at. And so I can say this because it's true, and I can say this because it will be used today. In those moments throughout the game, and there's a couple of three where the dancers are highlighted at a hockey game, I use my opportunity to check up on my soch. Because it is better for me to look down here than it is to look, okay? Do you know why? It's because I don't need to see that. I don't want to see that. Because I want to guard my heart. I'm a man, and man thinks things. And I'm going to guard my heart. So that will happen today, and I hope that you'll make that a goal and an intentional action. Whenever something comes past your eyes and it doesn't pass the smell test, look away. Look away. I mean, turn around, look up, whatever you got to do, look away. Second is the lust of the flesh. The tree was good for food and pleasing to the eyes. And so we have a natural lust in our bodies. And then the pride of life, also desirable for gaining wisdom. Can I ask this question? Have you ever felt like God is keeping you in the dark? Everyone's staring at me a bit blankly.
I think we all like to maybe sometimes know more than what we know.
Yes, you're right, Jeff. Sometimes we would like to know more. We're all, Yeji, let me make sure. Yeji's the youngest among us. Josh, are you and Yeji fairly close in age?
I'm 31.
Okay, well, see, I didn't ask her. Oh, well, my apologies. My apologies. But when you're younger, sometimes you can find yourself thinking that maybe God is keeping me from something. And when you're older, this little ditty called Midlife Crisis, it's for real. It's a for real thing. But at the heart of the midlife crisis is this very thing. Is God keeping something from me that I haven't already experienced? I've never owned a Corvette. I've never, fill in the blank. So we have to be very careful about the pride of life. Satan used these very same three temptations in the wilderness when he tried to take Jesus to task. He said, if you are the Son of Man, tell these stones to become bread. And we see that's the temptation of flesh. What? Jesus was hungry. 40 days without food. And I would think that pretty much about that time, anything would look good. And the adversary says this, it's always true-ish, the adversary. Well, surely your father wouldn't want you to starve to death. Surely a good father wouldn't say no to a few carbs. The lust of the eyes, the devil took him to the high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. How do you show God, who created it all, something that would impress him? But the adversary thinks he can. What's the most impressive sight? Or let me back up. What's one of the most impressive sights you've ever seen in your life? It could be a cityscape, it could be a landscape, it could be a monument. What's some of the things that really stand out in your mind that you've seen? Rocky Mountains. Yeah. They're pretty impressive. When you start driving up to them, you're like, what is that out there? Then you drive like 6 more days and you go, oh, it's the Rocky Mountains. Yeah, for sure.
The actual shape of the earth.
Okay.
High enough to see, you can see the whole view. You can see.
The curvature? Well, but see, Ronnie, that's an optical illusion because we know the world's flat.
Sure.
But yeah, Yeah. I mean, if you've ever seen, especially a from space of the globe, that's, yeah. Somebody else, what? The sunrise.
All colorful and,
Yeah. It's an impressive thing. The Lord really shows out first thing in the morning and the last thing in the evening, for sure. Anybody else? Waterfalls. Anyone in particular, or just?
what's the one we went to with the bridge that's in all?
Oh, Multnomah.
Yeah, Multnomah Falls.
Waterfalls. The water's always making its way somewhere. Coming from somewhere. That's right. Only to be put back into that circle of life. The circle of... Yeah, anyway. I started off on the wrong note, didn't I, Yedgy? I'm sorry, say again? Oh, yeah. I've seen some incredible things. I really, really have. And some of it is made by the Lord's hands himself. Some have been made through the hands of man. But I've seen some pretty incredible things. And then lastly, Jesus was tempted with the pride of life. All of this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me. I love this lie. Because he's offering what's not his to offer to the one in whom it already belongs. So our daughter, we were able to get her a car for her graduation, or there before. Nice, modest, new to her car. And she drove it, and and then she gets married, and you know how that all goes, and they decide they're going to get a newer car. And I remember today my daughter called me, and she goes, "Daddy, we're talking about getting a new car." I'm like, "Well, okay," because I told him, "I'm here for consult, but I am not inserting myself into your life. I'm not the dad and the dad-in-law who's always going, well. I told my son, if you ever want to know, just ask. But unless you ask." And what's funny is, and I hold to it, we had dinner Thursday night, and he was talking about something, and I'm just sitting there, I'm going, "I'm ready." And he looks over at me and goes, "So what do you think?" It's like a vampire. Don't invite him into the house. But I remember my sweet girl called me, "Daddy, we're thinking about getting a new car, and we're talking about maybe trading it, my car in." Okay. "But I wanted to call and see if you and Mom might like to purchase it for Mom to drive." See, Kara gets it. I said, "Honey, first let me applaud you for the courage. And then let me clarify the question. You are asking if your mom and I would like to buy the car that we gave to you with our money. You're giving us the opportunity to pay for your car twice." I said, "Am I understanding this?" "Well, Daddy," and I said, "Well, courage." We did not pay a second time for that car. But it's amazing because the adversary actually offers to the King of Kings the very thing that's not his, that only the King of Kings owns. Temptation at every point is just a lie.
Jesus said there was no truth in it.
No truth.
No truth.
No truth. What does no mean? None. Not. None.
There's no truth there.
Well, he didn't really mean it. No, he did. Why is it so easy to fall into temptation? Why do we seem to constantly struggle with sin? Now, the wrestling may at times vacillate between wrestling to save your life and wrestling just for entertainment purposes. But we do. We all wrestle. And so,
We're actually more in tune with Satan than we are with Christ because of our nature.
well, but we have a new nature too. So are you saying God divides us 50-50 and we just coin toss it? Is that what I'm hearing here? Well, is it Satan or Jesus today? Yay! I agree with your initial statement, but I would with the caveat that the more our Christ nature grows, the smaller the sin nature becomes. But we do. It's easier to sin, isn't it? It is. It's easy to do it. Truth is you don't even have to really try. It'll come natural. Sure.
Who teaches a child to lie?
Yeah. Who teaches a little kid to go, mine, mine? What's that?
The birds on Nemo.
Yeah, that's true. That's funny right there. The birds on Finding Nemo. First of all, because sin for a season is fun. I think that's one of the greatest misconceptions the church has ever tried to put forth to a lost world. Oh, well, sin ain't no fun. That's not true. For a season, sin can be pretty entertaining. But in the end, it's not so good. But yes, it has a temporary pleasure to it. That is the real truth that we need to be reminding ourselves and others, is sin does have a season, but it's a short season. That is one of the greatest thoughts you'll ever put in your toolbox when it comes to counting the cost. You might ride high for a season, but that season will pass. And the question we need to answer every time is that moment, one moment in time, college, I know, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about getting up there with my bride, but I can't hold my note standing next to my bride. I'm not disciplined enough any longer. But when we are facing temptation, we need to be honest. There could be an enjoyable reward. It will be a short season of return. But like the old preacher used to say, there's a payday someday. And the question we need to answer is the payday worth it? And I can tell you this, no, it's not. All right, well, let's take 15. I didn't get to finish it, so I'll have half my notes for next time.